This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Brieuc Pont, France's Special Envoy on Nutrition and Secretary General of the Nutrition for Growth Summit. Throughout his career, Brieuc has pivoted from traditional diplomatic roles to champion nutrition as a cornerstone of global development. We'll explore how nutrition intersects with climate change, security, and economic resilience in ways that affect countries worldwide. You'll hear about the challenges of maintaining momentum amid shifting political landscapes. He'll break down the Nutrition for Growth Summit, and Brieuc will share how multilateral development banks might be able to fill critical funding gaps. Let's get into it. Brieuc, welcome to the show. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Paul. Very happy to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with your background. You've had an extensive diplomatic career before focusing on nutrition. How did your experiences shape your approach to global development?
Well, I'm very new to global development. In fact, I always say beware of diplomats and above all, beware of diplomats who pretend to be experts. Those are the worst species. In a way, fortune comes to the innocent. So we'll see if that's true at the end. But the fact that I didn't know much or anything at all about nutrition, I think helped me realize some basic problems that this cause is facing. Also, I've been trained by, I must say, very inspiring bosses. And one of them told me, your job is not to force somebody to believe that what you say is right. Your job is to try to understand why people think differently and then understand their mindset and then work with them towards a convergence of ideas. There is no winner in a negotiation. A negotiation is you always trading off something for something else. Now, the world of nutrition is not a world of conflict, but what I've met is a very fragmented community, and that shocked me from the beginning. I looked at it, and what I call the theology of nutrition. Many people claiming their church was better than the others, when in fact they all have a contribution to bring to the cause of the fight against malnutrition. And if you allow people to understand that the neighbor, the guy next door, people next door are as useful as you are, it depends on the target. It depends on the goals you're pursuing. And I think we've managed to create a sense of community between the people of nutrition. And I'm quite happy about that.
What surprised you most? Is it this disagreement? Is it the power of nutrition? What
surprised me most is that people were actually holding a magic wand and they were not capable of branding it to governments. How is it possible that such a powerful policy gets only 1% of ODA when it's so impactful and it can actually help you bring the cause to, next level? Because once you've built resilience among nations, you have the basis to, again, play next level, and implement more ambitious policies, development policies that you could not if the population you're dealing with is affected by malnutrition, by stunting, by cognitive delays. What we say, that it's actually the motto of Envoy Paris, it all starts with nutrition. You can't have anything at all without nutrition. And I think that's what shocked me at the beginning, is that, people had that in their hands and they, instead of advocating for nutrition, they were quarreling about iron and zinc oxide and vitamins strategies instead of teaming up. And I'm happy that there are organizations or platforms like the Sun Movement who were trying to create this momentum. And I think that along with the Sun, with Afshan Khan and many others, we've managed to give a vision and a common vision, to set an objective, which is, getting up there, peak N4G on the top of the summit.
So it's a bit of a storytelling challenge, I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's about storytelling, but storytelling is not about, it's not marketing, it's also having people open their eyes and see the potential they have together. I don't know who said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's what we're doing. So we've gathered
Great.
this core group, which I like to call the flash mob for nutrition. It's not a coalition. We already have a coalition on school meals, but have been quite redundant to create a coalition for nutrition. And there's already plenty of people dealing with that. What we needed it was a sort of flash mob core group to make that collective push towards the summit, and people cheering us and giving us the energy and galvanizing us to get to that summit.
So for anyone that's not heard of it before, can you describe to us what is Nutrition for Growth?
Nutrition for Growth is one of those 21st century international relations unidentified object. It's a summit, every 4 year summit organized by the Olympic host, in theory, because it's not always been the case. And that is supposed to be, is it a pledging summit? Is it a quest for funds? Is it a beauty contest, where the organizer needs to beat the score achieved by the predecessor? I don't think so. So, we don't really know. It's like nutrition, do we have a definition of what nutrition is? Nutrition is something very blurry, in fact, and that's a strength and a weakness at the same time. It's a strength because it allows you to include a lot of stuff inside nutrition. You can be designing transportation infrastructures like roads and say this is nutrition sensitive because it will give the producers access to local markets, for instance. But you can also define nutrition, as a sort of fortifiers in baby bottles, period. So it's all in between. N4G is like that. N4G is a global gathering of supporters of nutrition organized by the Olympic host nation. And basically N4G is what you do with it. And people told me it was a tradition. I'm sorry, something that exists since 2012 is not a tradition. Swiss democracy is a tradition, for instance. French cuisine, UN bureaucracy are a tradition. But what we want is to make it become a tradition. And that's the idea, to enshrine it in the Olympic cycle and allow this legacy to live on.
So as Special Envoy, you've made a great effort to communicate that nutrition policies aren't just about nutrition, and you just shared a little bit on this. Can you explain what you mean when you say this?
Well, when I started advocating for nutrition once, it was sort of awful wake-up call or a reality shock when one colleague told me, "Oh yeah, you're a summit about baby bottles." Of course, that was intentionally provocative, but it helped me actually, because I realized that there's a problem with branding. Just go out there in the street and ask anyone, what is nutrition? Say, well, that's the products that I use at the fitness club. Others will say that's what I put in my baby's baby bottle, or they don't really know it's eating well, when in fact it's way wider than that. It's about the consequences of climate change, over pregnancies, over health, over what we eat. It's the consequences of urbanization on health. It's about crisis resilience. It's about the way we fund, innovative ways we can fund development. It's about innovation and technology. It's about plenty of things that all brought together bring us to something that is called nutrition. I don't think it's a good branding. I think we should call it super development, because in fact, what we are working on is the way we're going to design and craft development policy in the post-2030 era. And what is that? How is that? Well, if you look at engineering schools, for instance, engineering schools, now they are bringing several areas of expertise together, and they focus, what is the project? What do we want to achieve? What's the kind of expertise we need on that? We need a sociology, anthropology. We need a specialist of electricity, of power plants, power structures, road, I don't know. But this is now how an engineering project is designed, and that's how we should craft development. I think that's the strength that nutrition has, because it's so wide and there are no boundaries. You can be very creative.
I love that vision of transforming the way we do development and the way we think about it. And I think this is really critical for us to see the impact grow and to also lay that foundation which nutrition provides. So I think this is key.
I've been to a school on a field mission, and they were so happy that they were giving free meals to the children, and it had a great impact because plenty of kids were now attending school, and they were getting better marks because they were fed, properly, and their parents were happy because the kids were safe and they were not hanging around in the street, when there was crime. And the thing is, there were so many children attending school, so they needed more janitors to do the cleaning. And what happened? To finance the janitors, they opened a candy store in the school. So you see, the idea worked well, but here's the issue. They had to bring in a problem to sort another one. And therefore, that's why you need a holistic approach for this kind of project. And you need somebody to say, wait, what are we doing? Can't we find another way? It's great to hire 2 more janitors, but how are we going to fund that? Do we really want our efforts to be spoiled by their very own consequences?
No, I mean, that's a great example of unintended consequences, but also cancelling each other out, which happens often in development. And I think that holistic approach is so needed. So the landscape on nutrition is looking drastically different and more fragile than ever, even a month ago, and you've set up the Troika structure that gathers previous, current, and future summit hosts to really drive momentum between summit moments. What can you tell us a little bit about these ongoing conversations and your hope for how this continues?
Well, the United States government has announced a pause and assess. We are doing lots of efforts to try to convince them that if there's one policy that shouldn't be dropped, it's the one. It's nutrition, because you actually get value for money, and the taxpayer is happy, and you also address problems that are home-based as well. This is not the usual development policy that some might criticize. Now, whatever the decision taken by the United States government, I think we have to look forward. And we are very confident and happy that, for instance, Australia has joined. And, Australia is getting the Olympics in Brisbane 2032. And I sense a lot of interest among many nations and stakeholders of development on nutrition. I was in Cape Town on Friday at the Finance in Common Summit. If you look at the final statement, it includes nutrition as one of the innovative ways to finance development. So I think there's a pattern here. There's a trend, and that nutrition is getting support. I know, for instance, for a fact that the Secretary of Health and Sanitation in the United States is very staunch against, for instance, ultra-processed foods. So you see here, we have common ground, for instance, on that. So at some point, there will be, I'm sure there will be convergence.
So do you see the crisis at the moment that is kind of happening globally as an opportunity, I guess, to also reframe nutrition within the dialogue and the focus?
Well, you can transform, crisis. Always try to transform crisis into opportunity. But what I see here is that we can do more with less, and the impact of reduction. I mean, I wouldn't blame the US alone. I mean, if you look at what happened there's a COVID debt to pay back. Also, there's the consequences of the Russian war against Ukraine, which unleashed a food crisis, which itself induced a financial crisis. And not only a financial crisis because of inflation, but also because of the evaporation of development funds, which are, reallocated to defense, which is, I think, fully understandable. However, in France, we think that security is based on 2 pillars, defense and development. Yes. Conflicts have always been motivated for the quest for resources. So we need a more even distribution of resources, and there's plenty of people. Anyone deserves to stay to preserve its livelihood, his or her livelihood at home. So the idea is also about developing local economies, and that is a field in which nutrition is super impactful.
No, absolutely. You mentioned being in Cape Town last week for the Financing in Common Summit. What were some of the key takeaways and understandings around the role that public and multilateral development banks play in this driving this integrated nutrition agenda?
I think the conversations made very clear that public banks, PDBs, public development banks, still need to sort of understand what nutrition is about. And there are some who actually do. I mean, if you look at the Asian Development Bank, they decided to pledge $3 billion for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. They understood that this makes a difference. Don't have the culture of nutrition. And I must say, this is something we're kind of discovering in France as well. We have a president who's put us on track, for this with the great green wall in Sahel, the farm
Yes.
initiative, the vegetable proteins initiative as well, the coalition for school meals as well. So this is something that is sort of infusing. Banks, you basically need to convince them they need to reassess risk on nutrition. The impact being so important, the return on investment being so high, an average of $23 of GDP produced per dollar invested. And that's an average, because if you go to South Africa, it's 35. If you go to Indonesia, it's 53. If you focus on breast milk, for instance, breastfeeding, it's 44. So it has an impact. And that's the idea, is to tell the banks, when people think of development banks, they think development, but they forget the word bank. These are financial institutions that need to make profit to finance other projects. I think we had good conversations. There was a lot of interest, and I met funds which were very keen to get closer to this. So I'm quite confident I think it was useful to be there.
And last year, the G20 presidency of Brazil launched the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. And looking beyond Paris, how do you see some of the N4G commitments supporting the implementation of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty?
Well, actually, with Brazil, we've created sort of co-chair, when you fly an airline, but you get the miles on the other card. I must say, I applaud the fact that our Brazilian friends have been open to this sort of co-chair agreement. You're not going to ask a country that pledged at the Global Alliance on nutrition sensitive or specific commitments to redraft policy in 3 months because there's another summit coming in Paris. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So the idea is to register those pledges, and we had very good talks recently with Brazil. The idea of teaming up N4G and the Global Alliance. At some point, we'll have also to reflect on what we do with N4G. The scaling up nutrition movement is scheduled to come to an end in 2030. What happens next? We need a good discussion between supporters of nutrition to try to design, the way we are going. What is the governance of nutrition expected to look like? If we can call it a governance of nutrition, that sounds very bureaucratic, which we are not. We are based on a very nimble and sort of nimble approach and can-do attitude, which is, you would say, rather unexpected for civil servants, but that's what we do.
I think it's great. It's very refreshing and important. One thing I like to always close off in these conversations is a bit of a recurring question that kind of we can all relate to. And so I wanted to know, you've traveled and lived all over the world in different places. What's your favorite food? What do you really enjoy eating?
There are two things. Well, first, I love sushi. I'm sort of addict. Perhaps I should talk with an MD about this, but there's something I love, which is moqueca de camarão. And that's from Brazil. That's from the northeast of Brazil. And moqueca de camarão is shrimps with palm tree oil and coconut milk and pepperoni and rice. And it's just a killer. I love it. Drives me crazy.
I mean, Brazil on sushi is also amazing, isn't it?
Brazil on sushi, São Paulo is the largest Japanese city out of Japan in the world. And that's what I love about Brazil, where I spent many years of my life, including my youth, is this very open, culture, and they embrace every other people's culture and they sort of tropicalize it. It is absolutely fantastic.
Well, all the best for the summit, which is coming up very soon. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much, Paul, and see you all in Paris then.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.